What if the loudest fart in movie history also blew a hole clean through Hollywood tradition? Blazing Saddles didn't just push buttons in 1974, it mashed every one of them at once, rewiring comedy, race satire, and studio politics in 93 unruly minutes. 50 years later, the same gags are still lighting fresh fires, from courtroom showdowns in the 1970s to streaming-era trigger warnings. Strap in. This is the unfiltered story of the Western that refused to stay in its lane, and the wild, tragic, and oddly touching twists that followed its trail. Long before the cameras rolled, 26-year-old grad student Andrew Bergman scrawled a title that read like dynamite. Tex X, a winking salute to Malcolm X that put a black sheriff at the center of an all-white frontier town. Warner executives flinched, but they didn't toss the draft. They softened the name, kept the sting, and set the first match to a powder keg of racial satire no major studio had attempted. The premise alone was risky in an era when most Westerns were still polishing the myth of the noble white cowboy. Bergman's sheriff wasn't a sidekick or a victim. He was the smartest gun in town. And that flip in power, the joke that the status quo had never permitted, became the film's beating heart. But the explosive idea almost died in development hell. The first team attached was Alan Arkin directing and James Earl Jones starring. Serious, dramatic muscle, zero comedy pedigree. Nervous suits shelved it, convinced the timing was too raw. They didn't realize they'd only delayed the blast. Enter Mel Brooks, nearly broke after the 12 chairs. Desperation, he later admitted, pushed him to gamble on the unruly project. The moment he stepped into the room, he pinned a sheet of typewriter paper to the wall that screamed, "Please do not write a polite script." The writers' lineup read like mismatched dynamite sticks. Brooks, Bergman, Norman Steinberg, Alan Uger, and the volcanic Richard Pryor. Their first pass ran 412 pages, 8 hours of flatulence, gunfire, and racial slurs, before anyone bothered to trim. Warner's panicked. The five simply laughed and carved it down to a still bloated 275 pages, joking that the bad half had been removed. Pryor's presence mattered most. Brooks worried the avalanche of N-words would scorch audiences. Pryor shook his head. Sugar-coating racism kills satire. Use the real language, he told Brooks, or you got no movie. Arguments turned into all-night riff marathons fueled by Chinese takeout and envy-inducing obscenities. Bergman later called the process a drunken fistfight on typewriters. Nobody stayed in their lane. Jewish writers penned black jokes. Pryor wrote Jewish jokes, and the rule was simple. If it made the room howl, it stayed. Brooks phoned Gene Wilder in near tears. Wilder hopped a red eye, learned lines in flight, and slipped into costume Monday morning. The instant sparks with Cleveland Little rewired the film's tone, quiet, melancholy meeting, sly bravado. And suddenly, every calamity looked preordained. Richard Pryor, barred from starring because insurers labeled his drug troubles high risk, didn't sulk. He personally endorsed Little. "Coal black, they'll S themselves," he quipped, and focused on sharpening the sheriff's zinger-laden dignity from behind the keyboard. The first Warner Brothers screening felt like a funeral. Executives stared, arms folded, through fart symphonies, a horse-punched knockout, and relentless racial slurs. Domestic distribution chief Leo Greenfield muttered they should bury it and eat the loss. Brooks thanked them, pocketed their list of 20 demanded cuts, then crumpled it on the way out. The next night, he screened the same print for mailroom clerks, secretaries, janitors. The laughter was so violent, people toppled from chairs. Panic flipped to epiphany. Real audiences were howling. The brass backed off. Even so, Warner gambled low. Blazing Saddles opened quietly in just 3 cities: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. On 7 February 1974. Theaters packed anyway. Reviewers grumbled about vulgarity, but ticket lines wrapped up blocks. Word of mouth thundered the film onto hundreds of additional screens. With a budget of $2.6 million and no real advertising, Brooks's rowdy Western grossed $119.6 million domestic, more than 46 times its cost, and the #1 hit of 1974. Adjusted for inflation, that's close to $600 million. Better than many modern four-quadrant tentpoles. Suburban multiplexes, once wary of big city satire, found themselves adding midnight shows to keep up. Brooks stuffed jokes inside jokes like Russian nesting dolls. Governor William J. Le Pedoman takes his surname from Joseph Pujol, a 19th-century French flatulist who earned fortunes by performing perfectly pitched farts at the Moulin Rouge. Then there's the glorious anachronism. Bart gallops across a dusty 1874 desert and slams into Count Basie's tuxedo-clad big band, blasting the 1955 jazz hit April in Paris. Brooks wanted a moment so wrong, it short-circuited logic and exposed the movie as pure comic artifice. Brooks himself pops up everywhere. Yiddish-speaking native chief, chorus line singer, cranky moviegoer. Wife Anne Bancroft, one of only 24 performers with the triple crown of acting, quietly sits among the church congregation. Uncredited to this day and long ignored by IMDb. Even the fart joke lineage is scholarly. The Campfire Symphony nods to Pujol. Basie's orchestra sets up a later full-blown musical brawl, and the final fist fight shatters the fourth wall, spilling onto an adjacent soundstage cafeteria before bleeding into Hollywood Boulevard itself. Continuity be damned. Lunacy was the point. Veteran screen siren Hedy Lamarr discovered that the villain name Hedley Lamarr sounded uncannily like her own. She filed a $10 million claim against Warner Brothers, alleging they hijacked her identity. Mel Brooks, caught between panic and pride, settled privately, even poking fun at the fracas through the governor's wink. This is 1874. You'll be able to sue her. But shadows fell on the cast, too. 4 years after the premiere, Gig Young, whose on-set breakdown had nearly sunk the film, ended the life of his new bride and then his own. Brooks never spoke of the tragedy in public. Fans still pause at Young's name in the opening credits of They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And feel a chill. Yet official honors piled up. In 2000, the American Film Institute ranked Blazing Saddles No. 6 on its 100 Years, 100 Laughs list, ahead of Airplane and MASH. 6 years later, the Library of Congress sealed a pristine print in the National Film Registry, declaring it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. In 2022, Paramount rolled out Paws of Fury, The Legend of Hank, an animated samurai cat riff on Brooks' plot, complete with a 98-year-old director voicing a wise old shogun. The marketing called it a loose remake. Critics called it Blazing Saddles for Kids, with the curse words sanded off. 2 years later, streaming platform Max grafted a 3-minute video intro, hosted by film historian Jacqueline Stewart before Blazing Saddles plays. Stewart contextualizes the slurs and stereotypes, calling the movie audacious and still provocative. Outrage cycles erupted online. Some viewers dubbed it a trigger warning. Others applauded the history lesson. The clip, ironically, was first added in 2020. Outrage simply needed time to rediscover it. Brooks foresaw the storm. On BBC Radio in 2017, he sighed, "We have become stupidly politically correct. That's the death of comedy." The remark still circulates every time a headline claims the film couldn't be made today. From a scrappy Tex X outline to box office kingpin, from green bile collapses to courtroom showdowns, Blazing Saddles is proof that a fearless joke can outgun an army of doubters. Every fart, every slur, every broken wall aimed to bruise hypocrisy until it bled laughter. Half a century on, the debate rages hotter than ever. And that might be the film's sneakiest victory. Maybe the funniest part isn't the campfire or the horse punch. It's that a 1974 satire still makes boardrooms sweat, while regular people crack up in the aisles. The real joke, it seems, is that the loudest flatulence in film history refuses to go silent.